It was the third year of my secret relationship with Juliet when she suddenly announced her engagement. The groom wasn't me. Someone who knew the situation was furious on my behalf, but Juliet just laughed coldly. If you feel so bad for him, why don't you marry that broke loser yourself? Later, my grandfather's health took a turn for the worse, and the company was on the brink of collapse. I was forced to reveal my pregnant wife to the public so I could secure my inheritance. "Mr. Hayes, is your child in any way connected to Ms. Langdon?" a reporter asked. I gave the cameras a perfectly composed smile. "My child has nothing to do with Ms. Langdon." I heard that when Juliet saw me looking so pale on TV, she smashed everything in her room. Sometime after that, someone snapped a photo of New York's most private and mysterious heiress, whispering playfully to a man on a crowded street. "Liam," she'd said, "our baby is almost 1 year old and about to say, Dada. When are you going to make this official?" When I pushed open the door to the private room, Juliet was on one knee, holding a massive diamond ring. But she wasn't proposing to me. In front of her was a handsome, elegant young man in a white shirt. He was moved to tears, nodding and saying, "I do." I walked in. Juliet didn't even look up, completely focused on sliding the ring onto the young man's finger. It wasn't until his friends took him to the restroom to compose himself that Juliet finally gave me a detached glance. "Vincent is a simple guy and he's shy. Took me a lot of effort to win him over. It would be best if he never found out about the messy history between you and me." She paused. "Also, he accepted my proposal. I plan on announcing our engagement tomorrow." Juliet and I had been in a secret relationship for 3 years. Besides our grandparents, only a handful of people in our circle knew the truth. When she said that, the few in the room who were in on it all looked over at me. I took a deep breath. "Juliet, can you please hold off on the announcement? Even just for a month? No, 2 weeks." Juliet let out a laugh, a faint trace of mockery in her eyes. "Liam, it's come to this, and you're still clinging to me? Juliet, for old time's sake." "Enough." Julieta's face turned to ice as she slammed her wine glass on the table. 3 years. My family has covered at least $300 million of your family's losses. Isn't that enough? I was speechless. "You should go. I don't want Vincent to come back and get the wrong idea." I turned stiffly. As I opened the door to leave, I heard Juliet say to someone, "If you feel so bad for him, why don't you marry that broke loser yourself?" I couldn't help but laugh at my own expense. The Hayes family really had fallen from grace. After my parents passed away, the company nearly disintegrated. But Juliet seemed to have forgotten that it was our broke family that had saved her and her grandfather's lives all those years ago. All she remembered was her resentment, feeling that my family had held that debt over her head, forcing me on her. The news of Juliet and Vincent's engagement quickly spread throughout New York. My grandfather, already in poor health since my parents' death, was so incensed he ended up in the ICU. While I was at the hospital, keeping a round-the-clock vigil, my uncle forced his way into the company. Before, with the Langdon family's backing, they wouldn't have dared to make a move. But now that I was an orphan with no one to support me, they had no scruples. During a brief moment of lucidity, my grandfather gripped my hand and said just one thing. "Liam, the company was your parents' life's work. Even if you have to burn it to the ground, you can't let those vultures get their hands on it." My eyes welled up with tears. "Don't worry, Grandpa. I have a plan." My uncle and his family were fixated on an old family rule. A male heir of the Hayes family couldn't inherit the business without a child of his own. They were using it as an excuse to seize control of everything. But I would not let them win. The week after Juliet announced her engagement, I made the most absurd, yet most important, decision of my life. I needed a child to inherit the Hayes family business. Our lifelong family butler, Mr. Peterson, placed a file with the final candidate's information in front of me. "Mr. Liam, please take a look." The file was simple. The woman was from Los Angeles and had her father's last name, suggesting a single-parent household. Her academic record was impressive, a testament to her high intelligence and good genes. A detailed medical report confirmed she had a clean background with no hidden issues. Most importantly, the face in the photograph was so stunning it was almost disorienting. Mr. Peterson, are you sure a woman this exceptional needs to make this kind of deal? I asked, puzzled. Mr. Peterson smiled kindly. It seems someone in her family is seriously ill and she needs a lot of money. Fast. I thought of my grandfather in the hospital and felt a pang of sympathy. Give her an extra 500,000. Yes, Mr. Liam. 12 days after Juliet's announcement, which also happened to be the day of my own engagement, I met the woman named Vivian Lynn. She was wearing a plain black shirt and pants, no visible brand. They were probably cheap clothes from a department store, but even an outfit that cost less than $100 didn't look cheap on her. As stipulated in the contract, her eyes were covered with a black silk blindfold. When I pushed the door open, she instinctively stood up and turned toward the sound. I then realized how tall she was, at least 5 feet 6 inches. My gaze fell on Vivian Lynn's face beside me. Her lips were thin. I'd heard that people with thin lips were naturally cold-hearted. For a moment, I was lost in thought. Cold-hearted was good. Cold-hearted was perfect for this kind of transaction. A clean break with no strings attached. Just as I was about to speak, my phone rang. I answered it. Juliet's voice sounded strangely unfamiliar. Liam, why didn't you tell me Grandpa was in the hospital? It's not exactly a secret. Where are you now? I'll pick you up. We can go to the hospital together to see him. That's not necessary. Liam, your grandfather was always very good to me. I want him to have some peace of mind at a time like this. I said, that's not necessary. Thank you for the thought. Liam, you should know when to stop. Her voice was already laced with suppressed anger. I knew her well. For someone as proud and arrogant as her, calling me to offer an olive branch was a rare gesture. But it really wasn't necessary. After all, it was too late. When I opened my eyes the next day, I was in clean, soft pajamas. The other side of the bed was empty, as if everything that happened last night had just been a dream. I dragged myself out of bed to wash up. When I went downstairs for breakfast, Mr. Peterson informed me that Vivian Lynn had left during the night, just as we'd agreed. I sat down at the table, thinking of her boldness last night, of how I'd lost control and succumbed. I felt the back of my neck grow hot. Was she paid? 1/3 of the payment was transferred as per the agreement. The remainder will be paid upon confirmation. I nodded and said no more. At the Intercontinental Hotel, Vivian Lynn had long since changed out of her cheap clothes. After a swim in the private rooftop pool, her family's butler was already waiting in the living room. Your mother heard you were in town. She'd like you to join her for dinner tonight. Vivian casually tossed her towel aside and smirked. She's got something else up her sleeve, doesn't she? You'll be 25 after the new year. You can't blame your mother for being anxious. Vivian walked to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water. She pushed her soaked hair back, revealing a smooth forehead and a pale neck. What's the rush? In a little while, she might have another son-in-law to worry about. Vivian drank some water and teased the butler who had known her since she was a child. The butler was horrified. My dear young lady, you can't be serious. You are the sole heir to both the Smith and Lee families. You're more precious than gold. You can't just be so casual about this. The man who marries you must do so with all the proper ceremony. I know. Vivian sat down on the sofa, her eyes falling on the still visible bite mark on her left forearm. As she recalled that night, a gentle look slowly softened her features. The day before I was to meet Vivian again, I ran into Juliet at a party. Surprisingly, she wasn't with her fiancé, Vincent. After spotting her from a distance, I averted my gaze. Today was the birthday of Mrs. Song, a family friend. I'd chosen to attend in the hopes of reconnecting with some of my parents' old acquaintances. However, it was clear I had been too naive. I had long understood that friends disappear when your fortune does, but experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. Although my relationship with Juliet had been a secret, you can't keep something like that completely quiet. For those 3 years, I had certainly benefited from the Langdon family's influence to secure my own standing. But now that Juliet had announced her engagement, who would give a penniless orphan like me a second glance? My raised glass was left hanging awkwardly in the air for a long moment before Mrs. Song, as if only just noticing me, finally clinked her glass against mine. It was obvious she had no intention of making small talk. I certainly wasn't going to embarrass myself further. I made the toast and retreated to a quiet corner. Being snubbed so coldly put me in a foul mood. Before I knew it, I'd had a few too many drinks. Juliet appeared at my side at some point. Liam. She looked me up and down with her usual air of superiority. But I no longer felt the need to walk on eggshells, desperately trying to maintain our connection. Ms. Langdon. After a cool greeting, I prepared to leave. Juliet blocked my way. Liam, I went to see your grandfather a few days ago. He's not doing well. I know. The doctor spoke with me. Juliet's voice seemed to soften. Liam, I've also heard about the recent turmoil at your family's company. What are you trying to say, Ms. Langdon? I looked at her, my expression calm but distant. When I was younger, I was truly naive. I thought because we had known each other since childhood, grown up together, and because my family had done her and her grandfather a great service, she would surely treat me well. I completely overlooked the fact that if a woman doesn't like you, not even a debt of gratitude can bind her. And my family leveraging that favor was, in itself, a despicable act. Thinking about it, Juliet hadn't really wronged me. After all, you can't force matters of the heart. Juliet slowly stepped forward and gently took my hand. Liam, if you weren't so stubborn, I wouldn't be against helping you. Helping me? Yes. After all, your family saved my grandfather and me. Juliet let out a small laugh. I've been waiting for you to cave these past few days. Liam, we've known each other for so many years. I'm not going to just stand by and watch you sink. Juliet, just say what you want. I won't marry you, but we can maintain our previous arrangement. I looked at Juliet, surprised. After all, the way she had proposed to Vincent that night was so heartfelt, so profound, it could move heaven and earth. Apparently, it was all just for show. You're already engaged. So what? Who in our circle doesn't have a few special friends on the side? Juliet looked at me, proud and conceited. Liam, with the Hayes Company in its current state, you know what the smart choice is. Being with me can only benefit you. Juliet. I cut her off, disgusted. Before today, I honestly didn't hate you at all. In fact, I was reflecting on how my family had acted despicably by holding that favor over your head. But I don't think that way anymore. Liam, you are an absolute piece of trash. If my family had known they were saving an ungrateful snake, a total scumbag, they would have deeply regretted ever lending a hand. Liam, running your mouth won't do you any good. Think about your parents' life's work. If it's truly lost because of you, what would they think in their graves? If my parents knew I kept the company by being your secret lover, they would never forgive me in their graves. Liam, you'd better think this through. You know I won't give you a third chance. I picked up my glass and threw the drink in her face. Get out. Juliet's face was ashen. She was clearly furious. I was even prepared for her to hit me. A princess like her had never been treated with such disrespect. Liam Hayes, I'll be waiting for the day you regret this. The day you come back crying and begging me. With that, Juliet turned and walked away. A buzz of whispers filled the room. I stood there, oblivious to it all, then turned and walked out. As soon as I got in the car, Mr. Peterson called. Sir, she's here. I know. I'm on my way back. I hung up and stared out the car window at the dark sky. The day after we registered the marriage, my grandfather was declared to be in critical condition again. While my relatives were cornering me at the office, demanding I hand over the company seal, I called the media and held a press conference. At the conference, I announced my marriage and introduced my wife and daughter, who had never been seen in public. I declared that I would continue to lead the company my parents had built. Shortly after a brief Q&A with reporters, I got a call from Juliet. She was clearly enraged, her voice hoarse. Liam Hayes, I never slept with you. What is this about a child? This is some kind of scam you've cooked up, isn't it? I could understand Juliet's anger. All told, it had barely been a year since we broke up. You're right, you never slept with me. But I never said the child was yours, did I? I stepped into the elevator and looked at my reflection in the mirrored wall. Juliet, we broke up a long time ago. Our lives have nothing to do with each other anymore. Please don't call me again. What the hell is going on? You'd better explain yourself. I didn't answer. I hung up and immediately deleted her number. From now on, this would be my biggest secret. The woman named Vivian Lynn had taken the money I gave her and returned to Los Angeles after giving birth to our daughter. We would never see each other again. Contrary to what I expected, my daughter didn't look much like me. Mr. Peterson said her eyes, brows, and jawline were the spitting image of Vivian Lynn's. Let's call her Vivi, I said. Looking at her, I often felt a sense of dislocation. I had made Vivian wear a blindfold so she wouldn't know what I looked like or who I was. But Mr. Peterson had seen her. If he said so, it must be true. So that's what Vivian Lynn's eyes looked like. Even with the blindfold, I could vaguely tell she was beautiful. A woman like that, once she was out of her predicament, would have a limitless future. She would surely want to forget this sordid chapter of her life even more than I did. So, I didn't have to worry about her suddenly showing up to fight me for the child. I didn't have to worry about ever seeing her again. But every time I looked at my daughter, I couldn't help but think of those 2 nights. In this lifetime, she might be the only woman I would ever be with. And those 2 nights might be all the pleasure I would ever know. At Vivi's 1-month celebration, the famously private and mysterious Lynn family of New York sent an extravagant gift. I was surprised. The Langdons, even at the height of their influence, couldn't compare to the Lynns, let alone the now faded Hayes family. The Hayes and Lynn families had never had any dealings. We weren't even in the same league. Why would they send such a valuable gift? What surprised me even more was that when Vivi turned 100 days old, Mrs. Lynn herself paid a visit and invited me for a small get-together in 3 days. I was deeply apprehensive and confused. But Mrs. Lynn was a warm and gracious woman, and she seemed to bear me no ill will. She was especially fond of my daughter. During her visit, besides bringing a gift for me, she also brought a generous gift for Vivi. As she was leaving, she held the baby, unable to put her down, and kept looking back with a longing expression that only deepened my suspicion. So, 3 days later, when I went to meet her, I specifically asked Mr. Peterson to stay home and watch the baby. I took only my assistant and driver to the private club owned by Mrs. Lynn. My car had just pulled up when several people rushed out to greet me. "Mr. Hayes, please, come in. Mrs. Lynn has been waiting for you." "Yes, she told us to wait outside for your car." "Thank you," I said with a polite smile, following them toward the flower-filled hall. Unexpectedly, I saw a dark gray Bentley pull up slowly in the distance. The driver hurried to open the door, and an exquisitely poised woman got out. Through a row of flowering trees, I could only make out her silhouette, but my heart inexplicably skipped a beat. I even stopped in my tracks. I had never seen Vivian Lynn in the daylight or under bright lights, but the moment I saw that figure, it felt strangely familiar. Then I immediately dismissed the thought. Vivian Lynn was from Los Angeles, her mother was from there too. Mr. Peterson had chosen her precisely because she wasn't from New York and lived far away in LA. She wouldn't just suddenly appear in New York. But it's not like I own New York. I had no power to forbid Vivian Lynn from ever setting foot here. It wouldn't be strange if she did come to the city. But could it be her? "Mr. Hayes?" The person beside me called out softly. I snapped back to reality and hurried to catch up. "Does Mrs. Lynn have other guests today?" The person in front of me smiled warmly. "Our young mistress just returned to the city." He then gestured toward the Bentley. "That's her car." So the woman I saw was Mrs. Lynn's only daughter. Mrs. Lynn herself had married into the Lynn family from Los Angeles. Her daughter would naturally be named Lynn. So it wasn't Vivian Lynn. I breathed a sigh of relief, yet I felt an inexplicable sense of disappointment. This feeling of loss made me want to laugh at myself. Why should I be disappointed? Was I secretly hoping to see Vivian Lynn again? Our relationship was nothing but a business transaction. Once the deal was done, it should have been a clean break. As I thought this, my mind was still in a daze. When I entered the hall, I heard laughter. The person talking with Mrs. Lynn was likely her daughter. I instinctively looked up and met the woman's eyes. They were eyes I had never seen before, yet it felt as if I had seen them countless times. My heart stopped for a second. My thoughts seemed to freeze. "Mr. Hayes is here," Mrs. Lin stood up with a cheerful laugh, took my hand, and led me to a seat. She then ordered the servants to bring tea. "Vivian, this is Mr. Hayes." Mrs. Lin looked at her daughter, then back at me, her smile widening. "Mr. Hayes, this is my good-for-nothing daughter." "Mr. Hayes, I've heard so much about you," Vivian Lin said, walking up to me and extending her hand. My heart started beating again, gradually growing faster. My mind was still a blank slate, but a buzzing sound started in my ears. I didn't respond politely. I didn't shake her hand. I even looked at Mrs. Lin with a shocking lack of manners. "Mrs. Lin, what did you just call her?" Mrs. Lin looked surprised but still smiled. "It's her name. Vivian." "Vivian Lin," I mumbled, repeating the name. "Vivian Lin." I looked at the woman in front of me. She was almost the same height as the Vivian I knew. If I covered her eyes and brows, leaving only her nose and lips, my body swayed slightly. "Mr. Hayes." Vivian Lin quickly reached out to steady me, but I pushed her away, raised my hand, and gently covered her eyes. Exactly the same. Exactly the same. I remembered the first night we were together. I had thought to myself that Vivian Lin's lips were a bit thin, and people said such women were cold-hearted. But for me, cold-hearted was good. Cold-hearted was better for this transaction. But if Vivian Lin was her, why did she deceive me like this? She was a princess born with a silver spoon, impossibly wealthy, yet she pretended to be a poor student and entered into such a ridiculous deal with me. Fine. Let's say it was for fun, for the thrill of it. Then, after the transaction was over, we should have gone our separate ways. Why did she suddenly appear in my life again, inserting herself into my and my child's lives? At that moment, it all clicked. I understood why the Lin family had sent a gift for the 1-month celebration, why Mrs. Lin had personally visited when Vivi was 100 days old, and why she adored Vivi so much. They all knew. They knew Vivi was Vivian Lin's child. They wanted to take my child away from me. My hand dropped from Vivian Lin's face. She was clearly panicking. "Liam." She instinctively tried to grab me, but I shoved her hand away. "I'm sorry. I'm not feeling well. I need to go." "Mr. Hayes, you look terribly pale. Let Vivian drive you." I wiped away a tear and looked at Vivian Lin, unable to hold back a bitter laugh. "Vivian Lin. Should I call you Vivian Lin? Or Miss Lin, the heiress?" "Liam." I didn't linger. I grabbed my bag and turned to leave. Mrs. Lin and Vivian both followed me, but I didn't want to stop for even a second. It was all too sudden, too much for me to accept. I felt like a clown who had been kept in the dark the whole time. "Liam, can you just listen to me for a minute?" Vivian grabbed my wrist. I shook her off without a second thought. If I remember correctly, our contract was very clear. After the transaction was complete, there were to be no further ties between us. You took the money, so you should honor the agreement. "Miss Lin, I don't care if you're Vivian Lin or the great Lin heiress. The relationship between us ended last year. And I don't care what you're trying to do by showing up now." I took a deep breath, slowly composing myself. "I only have one thing to say. The child is mine. Her last name is Hayes. She has nothing to do with you or your family, and no one is going to take her from me. Liam, I never thought about taking the child." "Fine. If that's the case, then I'm the one being petty. Forget I said anything. I want to go home now. May I?" Perhaps my state was truly that bad, because Vivian didn't try to stop me again. Mrs. Lin called me several times afterward, but I didn't answer. Vivian also came to the Hayes residence to visit, but I refused to see her. Vivi grew day by day, and just as Mr. Peterson had said, her eyes and brows were a mirror image of Vivian's. I also managed to learn a few things about Vivian from him. She was the only child of her parents. On both her maternal grandfather's side and her paternal grandfather's side, she was the sole heir. She had two identities. In Los Angeles, she was Miss Vivian Lin of the Lin family. In New York, she was the young mistress of the Lin family. Actually, it wasn't really a deception. Vivian Lin was her real name, but thinking back on my meager knowledge of her past made me feel embarrassed. The sole heir to two powerful families, and I had pitied her, wanting to give her an extra $500,000. I wonder if Vivian was laughing at how foolish I was when she took the money. Sometimes I really couldn't figure it out. A woman like her could have any man she wanted, any thrill she desired. Why did she have to play with me like this? She said she had no intention of taking the child, but I wasn't naive enough to believe her. Both families had so few heirs. Even if Vivian didn't care, the elders certainly would. What if they really decided to fight me for Vivi? I didn't dare to imagine the consequences. The outcome was obvious. It would be like an ant trying to stop a car. Although I refused to meet with anyone from the Lin family, Vivian still managed to seep into my life without a sound. The Lin family truly showed no signs of wanting to fight me for Vivi. On the contrary, the gifts they sent for me and Vivi were a near daily occurrence. Even when I refused to accept them, they persisted. Sometimes, even Mr. Peterson would try to persuade me. For a family of their stature to be this humble is truly rare. As he said this, Vivian was waiting downstairs. It was September in New York, still hot and humid. Around noon, the sun was scorching. Vivian's bangs were damp with sweat, and a large patch on the back of her shirt was soaked through. "Sir, I really don't think the Lin family has any ulterior motives. And Miss Lin, she doesn't seem like a bad person," Mr. Peterson said, looking downstairs with a hint of pity. "You've seen it for yourself this past month. Honestly, with Miss Lin's background, if she really wanted to do something, why would she go through all this trouble?" I couldn't help but look downstairs too. Vivian had been standing there for nearly 2 hours. The summer heat was still intense. If something happened to her, I thought of Vivi, and of Vivi's eyes, which were identical to hers. In the end, my heart softened. Let her in. Have the kitchen prepare some iced tea to help with the heat. I spoke softly, my eyes fixed on Vivian's beautiful, noble face. After a long moment, I looked away. "I'll be down in a minute. I need to have a proper talk with her." Mr. Peterson went downstairs, overjoyed. I sat upstairs for a while, changed into a fresh shirt, and then went down. Vivian was sitting in the living room drinking tea. When she saw me, she put down her cup and stood up. "Mr. Hayes." I had the servants leave and got straight to the point. "Miss Lin, let's have a real talk today. What exactly do you and Mrs. Lin want with all of this?" Vivian looked at me, silent for a long moment. I heard the ticking of the wall clock, the occasional lazy chirp of the caged birds on the porch, and what sounded like Vivi's faint crying from a distance, which then stopped. Everything was quiet. The air conditioning was on, but my heart was a mess of frustration. Just as my patience wore thin and I was about to ask her to leave again, Vivian finally spoke. "Mr. Hayes, I would like to ask you to marry me." She paused. The real deal. A proper wedding, the whole 9 yards. I was stunned. The teacup in my hand nearly fell. But Vivian continued, "Mr. Hayes, this isn't a sudden impulse. Nor is it a decision made after careful consideration of all the pros and cons." "Then what is it?" Vivian gave a faint smile. "Liam, I don't know if you remember, but 20 years ago, you and your grandfather rescued some people at sea." Of course, I remembered. I was only a few years old then, but my grandfather told me the story so often that I still remembered it today. Juliet and her grandfather were among those our family's private yacht rescued. I was one of the people you rescued, but my grandfather never mentioned you. A cousin of mine took me out on the boat that day. He was afraid his family would find out and punish him, so he concealed my identity. I was only 8 years old. The ordeal at sea terrified me. I nearly died. In the end, the only thing I remembered was the character for Hayes carved on the yacht. As Vivian spoke, her voice softened instantly. "And a very small, very cute little boy who gave me a cup of hot water." Liam, for all these years, I never gave up on the idea. I wanted to find that person and marry him. Vivian had been gone for a long time, but my mind was still in chaos. I called Mr. Peterson into the study. "Mr. Peterson, how did you find Vivian Lin in the first place?" "Sir, actually, it was Miss Lin who approached me," Mr. Peterson said, not daring to look at me. "I had already selected 2 candidates for you and was about to send you their files. But Miss Lin's information and resume were so clean, so perfect. I was privately very inclined to choose her, so I let her cut in line. I didn't expect you to choose her as well. I didn't know whether to be angry or amused. She was certainly confident. Did she ever consider what would have happened if I hadn't chosen her? It was only then that I remembered. I had seen her picture. Her ID photo was in the file Vivian had sent, and I really was captivated by her face at first sight. Mr. Peterson, what am I supposed to do now? Sir, you're not even 25 yet. When you said you wouldn't marry or start a family again, I never agreed with it in my heart. You're so young, with your whole life ahead of you. If Miss Lin is sincere, there's no harm in giving it a try with her. Besides, the Lin family has no intention of taking the child. I think their sincerity is genuine. Mr. Peterson sighed affectionately. I know you were hurt by the Langdons and that scoundrel Juliet, but there are still good women in the world, aren't there? But she lied to me. Why didn't she just find me and say she wanted to repay our kindness? There were so many ways she could have shown her gratitude. Why did she have to do it like this? Vivian couldn't help but laugh. Well, sir, you were in a bit of a rush. If Miss Lin hadn't intervened when she did, you might have already chosen someone else and been stuck with the consequences. It was a strategic move. Miss Lin was afraid she'd be too late and regret it for the rest of her life. I grabbed a pillow and buried my face in it. But I'm just so angry. And I hate her. Why should I give it a try with her? Even if I wanted to date, it wouldn't necessarily be her. There are plenty of beautiful, talented women in New York. Ms. Collins, another staff member, chuckled. All right. The master can date whoever he wants. But despite her words, Ms. Collins had clearly picked a side. The moment there was a whisper of me going on a date, Vivian knew about it. I had just sat down with my date at a cafe for afternoon tea when Vivian's Bentley pulled up across the street. We were both single, but for some reason, the moment her car appeared, I felt the guilt of being caught red-handed. Vivian didn't disturb me. She didn't even get out of the car. But I couldn't sit still. I forced myself to make an excuse and sent the woman I was with on her way. As the sky began to darken, I finally grabbed my bag and stood up to leave. Vivian got out of her car. The streetlights were turning on one by one, bathing her in a shimmering glow. I pretended not to see her and walked straight down the street. I walked all the way to the intersection without looking back, but I just knew she was following me. The walk signal turned green. As I was about to cross the street, Vivian gently grabbed my wrist from behind. A cyclist whizzed past me. Vivian pulled me in front of her. Winter was setting in New York. She was wearing a navy blue trench coat. Liam. She called my name softly. As a gust of night wind blew, she reached up and smoothed my messy hair. I noticed someone nearby seemed to be taking pictures. Over the past few weeks, I had heard all sorts of rumors about the Lin family and Vivian. She spent most of her time in Los Angeles, and when in New York, she was always extremely low-key and mysterious, her whereabouts unpredictable. But she had been visiting my house so frequently lately that she'd attracted the attention of gossip mongers and paparazzi. Vivian, I think someone's taking our picture, I said, trying to push her away. But Vivian simply let go of my wrist and wrapped her arms around my waist instead. Vivi is almost a year old and about to say, Dada. When are you going to make this official? Those photos and videos spread like wildfire across New York. Someone with too much time on their hands even started analyzing Vivian's lip movements, trying to figure out what she had said to me. Even Juliet came to my house. It was strange. She had been so in love with Vincent, but it had been nearly 2 years since they announced their engagement, and they still hadn't held a wedding. I met her in the living room. Juliet was direct. The child is Vivian Lin's. I didn't answer, asking instead, what does that have to do with you? Liam. Vivian comes from an incredibly powerful family, and she's the sole heir on both sides. What do you think her motive is for getting close to you? She just wants to take the child. Whether she does or not, what does it have to do with you? Liam, I'm thinking of you. I'm afraid you'll be deceived and end up being the one who gets hurt. What could she possibly take from me? What if she tries to take Vivi? You're overthinking things. Vivian arrived so quickly, Mr. Peterson must have tipped her off again. I leaned back against the soft sofa, sipping my hot tea comfortably. Vivian strode into the living room, brushing off the snow. A servant quickly brought her favorite Longjing tea. She sat down beside me, as relaxed and at ease as if she were in her own home. Juliet looked uncomfortable but forced herself to continue. Are you saying you have no such intention, Miss Lin? Vivi is your child and a daughter at that. Even if you don't, what about the elders in your family? I held my teacup, watching the tea leaves float and sink. This was a point I was also curious about, but I had never asked Vivian. Vivian took a sip of her tea, the lid clinking crisply against the cup. The room was warm, but outside, snow was falling heavily. I put down my cup to watch the snow, but Vivian took my hand. Vivi will always be a Hayes. That will never change. When she said this, Juliet's face was a picture of astonishment. Vivian Lin, can you really do that? Couldn't help but look at her too. Let time be the judge. Anyone can say nice things. Anyone can make a promise. Juliet's face grew uglier. Vivian just chuckled. True. Anyone can make a promise. You and your grandmother should know that better than anyone. Juliet's face turned deathly pale. Yes. All the promises her grandmother had made in the past had, in the end, come to nothing. When my grandfather entrusted me to her, she too had promised to take good care of me, to help me protect the Hayes family. But in the end, I felt a sense of release. In that moment, I finally, completely let go. We expect something in return, and that's why we end up so disappointed. But when we ask for nothing, fate sometimes gives us the best possible arrangement. For example, sending Vivian Lin to me. After our engagement was settled, Vivian began to stay at the Hayes house as a matter of course. It was the same bedroom, the same quiet night. The only difference was that Vivian's face wasn't covered by a black silk blindfold. We had both had a little to drink. In a tipsy haze, I pushed her onto the sofa and studied her properly for the first time. What are you thinking about? About why you did all this? I had to repay a life-saving debt. The only way was to offer myself in marriage. I think I'm the one getting the short end of that stick, I teased. Vivian laughed and held me tighter, resting her chin on my shoulder. Liam, it was my fault. You're damn right it was your fault. You have no idea how much I hated you, and you have no idea how much I like you. Are you really letting Vivi keep my last name? Of course. But the Lin and Lee families only have you. We have Vivi now, but her last name is Hayes. Is that so important? Vivian looked up and kissed me lightly. Does that make her any less my child? Does she not have the blood of both the Lin and Hayes families? Few people could think so clearly. Everyone cares about different things, I guess. I couldn't help but smile. I cupped her face, just like that other night, and asked, have you showered? I have, sir. Then, take off your clothes. Her eyes twinkled with laughter as she pulled me up and to the side. Then she stood up. In the warm room, Vivian raised her hands and undid the buttons of her shirt. She pulled the hem out crisply, then unbuckled her belt. But this time I didn't look away. I watched until the very end. She coughed lightly, her scorching gaze sliding across my face. Liam, a man should be a little more reserved. I laughed and pulled her into my arms. Are you shy? Vivian held me steady and whispered in my ear, Sir. This time, may I kiss you? I didn't answer. I just lowered my head and kissed her.